The scent of white jasmine and expensive gin was the first thing that hit me, thick and intoxicating in the morning stillness of my living room. I watched the slow, rhythmic rise and fall of her chest beneath my old, threadbare college hoodie, the one with the frayed sleeves and the faded logo that represented a life I'd lived a century ago. She looked so small, tucked into the corner of my sofa, a sharp contrast to the woman who usually occupied the mahogany-clad corner office on the 52nd floor. Her skin was flushed, a soft glow catching the first rays of the Manhattan sunrise, and for a fleeting moment, the ice queen of Avery and Associates was gone. In her place was something raw, something human, and something dangerously close to mine. I remembered the heat of her skin when I carried her inside hours earlier, the way her hair had spilled over my shoulder like liquid silk, and the way she'd murmured my name, not as a command, but as a plea. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, an uncomfortable reminder that I hadn't felt this alive, or this terrified, in 3 very long years. I stood there, coffee mug forgotten on the counter, caught between the ghost of my past and the complicated reality of the woman sleeping on my couch. To the rest of the world, I was Liam Miller, the reliable senior analyst, the guy who never missed a deadline, and the man who wore his widower status like a quiet, invisible badge of honor. For 36 months, my life had been a curated loop of spreadsheets, school lunches, and the hollow silence that follows a child's bedtime. My wife, Claire, had been the sun, and when she burned out after a short, brutal battle with illness, I'd learned to live in the permanent twilight. I'd become a master of functioning grief, the kind where you smile at the PTA meetings but feel absolutely nothing inside. Sloane Avery was the only person who had kept me from freezing entirely. She wasn't the kind of boss who gave pep talks or sent get-well cards. She was the kind who gave you a reason to keep your head down and work until the pain became a dull throb. She was brilliant, ruthless, and possessed a dry wit that could decapitate a board member's ego in 6 words or less. We had a silent pact. I gave her my best hours and my most meticulous financial models, and she gave me the grace to leave at 5 p.m. sharp to pick up my daughter Chloe from her dance classes. I respected her, I feared her. I never, not in my wildest, most feverish dreams, expected to be watching her sleep in my living room, while I tried to remember if I had crossed a line I could never step back over. The night before had started with the usual corporate pageantry. It was the firm's decennial gala, a high-stakes masquerade of wealth and ego held at a rooftop lounge in Chelsea. The air was crisp, the skyline was a jagged crown of light, and the champagne flowed like it was free, which, for us, it was. I was there because I had to be, leaning against a marble pillar and checking my watch every 10 minutes, wondering if Chloe had finished her homework for Mrs. Gable. Sloane was at the center of the storm, radiant in a dress of midnight silk that clung to her like a second skin. She moved through the crowd with the predatory grace of someone who owned the room and everyone in it. But as the clock struck 11, I saw the mask slip. It was subtle. A slight tremor in her hand as she reached for her 4th martini, a glassiness in her eyes that had nothing to do with the celebration. When I found her on the terrace, away from the prying eyes of the partners, she was staring at the Hudson River with a look of such profound desolation that it made my own grief feel like a shallow scratch. She told me then, her voice cracking like thin ice, that her world had ended that morning. Her husband of 12 years hadn't just left. He had methodically dismantled their life, served her with divorce papers via a courier at her desk, and moved in with a woman who was likely still in grade school when Sloane was passing the bar. 12 years, Liam, she'd said, her eyes fixed on the dark water. I built an empire, and I forgot to build a home. I gave him everything, and he treated it like a starter marriage. She was breaking right there in front of me. The Ice Queen was melting into 1,000 jagged pieces of hurt and betrayal. I couldn't let her go home to an empty, echoing penthouse. I couldn't let her call a car service and risk a driver seeing her in this state. So I did the only thing that felt right. I took her home, not to hers, but to mine. The drive was a blur of neon lights and the rhythmic hum of tires against the asphalt. She had leaned her head against the window, her breathing shallow and ragged. By the time we pulled into my suburban driveway, the adrenaline of her anger had faded, leaving her limp and exhausted. I had to lift her out of the passenger seat, her arms looping instinctively around my neck for balance. The The proximity was staggering. I could feel the heat of her skin, the softness of her perfume, and the desperate way she clung to me as if I were the only solid thing left in her universe. Inside, the house was quiet. I put her in the guest room, but she'd gripped my sleeve, her eyes wide and terrified of being alone in the dark. So I brought her back to the sofa. I found her a pair of my old sweatpants and a hoodie, and I turned my back, my heart pounding, as she clumsily changed out of that restrictive, expensive dress. I spent the rest of the night in the armchair across from her, a self-appointed sentry guarding her sleep. I watched the shadows shift across the ceiling, thinking about how strange life was. How the woman who controlled my paycheck was now curled up in my old clothes, seeking refuge in a house filled with Legos and crayon drawings. The floorboards creaked upstairs. Chloe was waking up. I looked back at the sofa just as Sloane's eyes fluttered open. They were the color of a stormy Atlantic, sharp, disoriented, and momentarily clouded with pain. She sat up slowly, the oversized hoodie slipping off one shoulder to reveal the delicate, pale curve of her collarbone. She looked at me, then at the room, the magnetic letters on the fridge, the pile of picture books by the TV, the framed photo of Claire on the mantel. Finally, she looked at herself in my clothes. The silence between us was heavy, thick with the weight of the previous night's vulnerability. She stood up and walked toward me, her footsteps silent on the rug, until she was standing just inches away. I could smell the faint remnants of her jasmine perfume, mixed now with the scent of my home. Fabric softener and toasted bread. "Liam," she whispered, her voice a low, husky rasp that sent a jolt through my system. She reached out, her fingers grazing the line of my jaw, her touch hesitant. Did something happen last night? I remember the car. I remember your arms. But the rest is dark. It was the question that could end my career or redefine my existence. I looked her directly in the eye, my voice grounded in the truth that Claire had taught me, that integrity is the only thing you keep when everything else is gone. No, Sloane, you were drowning and I just gave you a place to breathe. I brought you here to keep you safe. Nothing happened that you didn't want, and nothing happened that would make you ashamed to look at me in the office tomorrow. You're my boss, but last night, you were just a person who needed a friend, that's all. I watched the tension leave her body in a visible wave. She didn't move away, though. Instead, she leaned in, her forehead resting against mine for a long, quiet second. "You're a good man, Liam Miller," she murmured. "I think I'd forgotten they existed. Everyone else in my life wants something from me. You just gave." The door to the stairs flew open, and Chloe burst into the room, her hair a chaotic mess of morning curls. She stopped dead when she saw Sloane. "Are you a princess?" my daughter asked, her voice filled with a child's unfiltered wonder. Sloane actually laughed, a real melodic sound that I'd never heard in the office. She knelt down, the oversized hoodie pooling around her on the floor. "No, sweetie," she said softly. "I'm just someone who got a little lost, and your dad was kind enough to help me find my way back." That morning didn't lead to a scandal or a messy HR investigation. It led to pancakes. It led to Sloane Avery sitting on my kitchen floor, still in my old hoodie, helping a 6-year-old build a Lego castle while I flipped blueberry flapjacks. The weeks that followed were a delicate, slow-burn dance. We were still professional in the office, perhaps even more so. But there was a new language in our glances, a secret shared between the lines of quarterly reports and budget meetings. She started coming over on Saturdays, not for strategy sessions, but because she missed the noise of a house that felt like a home. She fell in love with Chloe's spirit, and in doing so, she found the pieces of her own heart that she thought had been permanently discarded. I watched her transform. The sharp edges of the Ice Queen didn't disappear. She was still the most brilliant, formidable woman I knew, but they became a shield she used to protect our little trio instead of a weapon to keep the world at bay. And I realized that I was changing too. For 3 years, I had been a ghost in my own life, waiting for the clock to run out, living for my daughter but dead to myself. But with Sloane, I felt the sun again. She didn't replace Claire. She just showed me that the human heart is a vast, resilient thing, capable of holding both the sacred memory of a lost love and the terrifying, beautiful fire of a new one. 6 months later, On a quiet Tuesday evening after Chloe had fallen asleep, Sloane turned to me on that same sofa. "I realized something today," she said, her hand finding mine. "That night at the gala, I thought I was losing everything, but I was actually just losing the things that were keeping me from finding you." A year after that, we didn't return to a rooftop gala. We stood in a small, sun-drenched garden in upstate New York. Sloane was in a simple white dress, looking more powerful than she ever had in a boardroom. Chloe was the flower girl, taking her job with the gravity of a lead auditor. As we stood before our friends and family, Sloane leaned in and whispered into my ear, "Just for me. I'm glad I asked you that question in the kitchen." I squeezed her hand, looking at the life we had built from the wreckage of 2 heartbreaks. "And I'm glad I had the right answer," I replied. We often think that our lives are defined by the grand, sweeping moments, the promotions, the victories, the big public I-dos. But the truth is, we are defined by the quiet choices we make in the dark. We are defined by who we reach for when the world is crumbling, and who we choose to carry when they can no longer walk. My life didn't end when I lost my wife, and Sloane's didn't end when her marriage failed. They were just beginning, waiting for a single night of kindness to bridge the gap between who we were and who we were meant to be. If this story touched your heart and reminded you that it's never too late for a second chance at happiness, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. We bring you daily narratives of love, resilience, and the unexpected turns that lead us home. Click the notification bell so you never miss a journey. What's the bravest thing you've ever done for someone you cared about? Let us know in the comments below.